Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi everybody, I'm Bob and I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me in the back? What? I certainly wouldn't want anybody to miss any of this. I want to thank Tony and whoever else is responsible for us being here tonight. The other part of this us business is a lady I'm with tonight. Her name is Pat. Pat, would you stand, please? Back here. There you go. If I behave myself between now and the 20th of August, Pat and I will have been married 39 years. Pat and I have been the best of friends for 20 years, 6 months, and 14 days. I want to point out that it only took us about 10 hours to get here today from Dana Point. It took us about an hour and a quarter to get to the airport. It took about an hour to fly over here. 15 minutes to get my luggage. Then we spent 3 hours in the parking lot looking for Janice's car. But we made it, and we're pleased to be here, and it's an honor. Was it 1952? What was that over here? 1952? My God, she can almost take it a day and a half at a time now. Well. And congratulations over there. I know you're not paying attention, but we love you. In the sobriety capital of the world, which happens to be Orange County in Southern California. Boo. We have an old dinghy running around down there. About every time he takes his birthday, he always welcomes those that stood up and identified themselves, and then he astutely mentions that for everyone that did, there's always one that didn't. I don't know. I wasn't quick enough to count everybody. I imagine there were about 40 people that stood up here with less than 30 days sobriety. I'd like to welcome all 80 of you here tonight. And I don't know how you new friends feel about this whole shindig here today, but this is really something. And the cause for why we're here is even more important. As a matter of fact, Larry W. gave me some instructions. And it says, don't use profane or vulgar language. Don't promise jobs or aid of any kind. Don't talk down to the group. Don't give prolonged drunkalogs. Don't take anything in or bring anything out, including messages. Don't give addresses to inmates. Don't make derogatory remarks about officials and or institutions. And the other side of it says it's from the correctional facility Arizona area coordinator. I wonder if that damn bird's sober. Janice almost wiped one out getting here tonight, I might point out. But I don't know how you new friends are feeling here tonight. I want to share with you a little bit about how I felt when I got here. I didn't understand you people at all. You know, the first thing you did was tell me the exact second you had your first drink, and I couldn't figure that out. I didn't remember it then. I don't remember it today, but today it's not important. Then you turned right around, you told me you didn't know when you became an alcoholic. I thought that's absolutely ridiculous. I knew exactly when I became an alcoholic. It was my 6th meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's when I became an alcoholic. I sure as hell didn't volunteer for this outfit, I'll guarantee you. I I wasn't an alcoholic when I was 16. I was drinking. It happened to be after choir practice one night, and we were wound up in my buddy's garage, and we were snorting out of his dad's jug, and as a result of that evening, 5 of us were convicted of second-degree kidnapping. We had an exciting evening, folks. I mean, how the hell did we know the kid we took out to the dump to walk back home, how did we know it was going to take him 3 days? But I remembered that, and I remembered something else. I remembered, Bob, when you drink, you'd better be careful. And I want you to know that I don't share much about that. I just say that I remembered it, you know, and life goes on. I could tell you the time when I was 22, what I'm doing on this particular occasion is I'm creeping and crawling on my hands and knees across the lobby of the Imperial Hotel in downtown Tokyo. I'm, again, just having a hell of a good time. I'm certainly not an alcoholic. I do remember feeling very grateful the next morning when the police couldn't identify the guy who did it the night before, probably because the next morning he was fully clothed. These are the things that alcohol made me do. I could go on with a litany of these things. I don't think it's that important. I could bring you up to more modern times. I could tell you about the time that I was standing before my boss and I'm telling him things that I don't really want to tell him. Like I quit. I mean, who the hell wants to quit? I'd worked 18 years for that job. And actually what I told him was that I was going to a hospital in Long Beach, California, where they teach people how to drink better. That's what I told him. And he didn't understand, and neither did I. And I don't know where those words are coming from. And I got sarcastic with the guy. And finally, I just suggested to him that, you know, he could give me leave or court-martial me or do anything he wanted to do to me. And that didn't seem to get his attention. So I just said, why don't you take this battalion I'm commanding and stick it in your ear? I want to tell you, sports fans, something I found out in a hell of a hurry. That's not quite the way to talk to a Marine colonel. When he finally got his finger out of my face, I learned a few things. Number one, I learned I was going to call a hospital, nobody else. And number two, I learned that he was going to call a commanding general of the 1st Marine Division at Camp Pendleton and put one of his battalion commanders on report. They call it insubordination in an outfit, you know. They frown on that. And I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what was going to happen to me or anything else. I did know when I left the regimental commander's office that day, there were a few other things in my life that were a little bit screwed up. I had had that battalion up in the area for training up in the Sierras. It's called Pickle Meadows or Bridgeport. We have 100,000 acres of training area up there. And during that entire 30-day period, during the month of October of 1973, Pat and I had not communicated one bit. I mean, she's in Dana Point, I'm, you know, right up the road. No telephone calls, no letters, no nothing. It seemed to me that when I came around, our 2 daughters, Rhonda and Laura, I don't know, they just seemed to run from me, you know, or cringe or something. It was a very uncomfortable relationship. That God that I'd learned about back at choir practice, I know I'd split company with him a long time before that. The bank account sure as hell wasn't growing very fast. And I guess I just made up my mind that the career was the last to go, and I knew it was gone because you don't give up a command in that outfit or any other outfit that I know of and expect to survive. But you know, something told me that I'd done something right for a change, and I didn't know what it was. And I really had my doubts 3 days later after I gave up that command, got ready over the weekend, and on Monday morning I reported to the Navy Hospital in Long Beach, California, at the U.S. Naval Station. Now, for those of you who know anything about the relationship between the United States Marine Corps and the United States Navy, you know damn well I got a problem. I was telling Larry today that those sailors, they're a weird bunch of people. They take us places and drop us off and leave, you know, weird. And for a few minutes here, especially for our, you know, 85 newcomers, I'd like to share with you that I got a problem when I walk into this place. And by the way, I'm reciting my attitude 20 years, 6 months, and, you know, 14 days ago. It wasn't that red hot, and today I've changed. I want to point that out to any of you who may have been in any way affiliated with the United States Navy. I'd like to get home in one piece tonight. But at any rate, here we go. And I asked the sentry where it was, and he said over there. Typical Navy directions. And I found it. He was right. It was over there. But, it's an old beat-up World War II barracks held together by about 12 coats of paint. Windows missing, screens ripped. I walked into the place, and one of the doors almost fell off its hinges. Typical Navy building. I walked into the entryway of this place, and all I could see were Navy chiefs running around with long hair and short trousers. I just knew, by God, if I get a Marine fire team up there, we'd score that place away in a hurry. Cigarette butts laying all over the deck. It was a mess. And I didn't pay much attention to this little dude, but he saunters up to me just as big as you please, and he happened to be one of those long-haired, short-trousered dudes. He looked me right in the eye, and he said, "Hi, who are you?" And he extended his hand. I didn't take it. I just took 2 paces to the rear, and I looked down as far as I could at that turkey, and I commenced to tell him who the hell I thought I was. Get that little sucker. Get him. And, he interrupted me. He had no class at all. He said, "No," he said, "you don't have to mention your rank. I can see what rank you are. You're in your uniform." Boy, he was a surly devil. And he was a weird guy. And I noticed something very peculiar about this dude. He didn't look up at the wall or down at my feet or over my shoulder or out the window. He looked me right square in the eye. And I found this later in you. And I didn't understand it. But anyway, he carried on there something awful for about 3 minutes. And I guess I learned his entire life history. And he told me he was an alcoholic. And I felt very sorry for him. But before he ran, he looked me right in the eye one more time. And he kind of went like this, and he said, "Just remember, you're a patient just like the rest of us." And then he ran like hell. And I followed him. I was going to put him on report, But I got interrupted, and I was put in this clothes closet, and I filled out a bunch of papers, and it took me about 2 hours. And it was about 5 minutes to 10, and that Monday morning, another sailor entered my life. He just stuck his head through the hatch there, and he said, "Hey, there's a room down at the end of the passageway." He said, "We'd like you to go down there, find a chair, sit down, and listen." Well, I found the room, and the door was right about over here, and I sat right there. Of course, I didn't know if I was going to stay or not. I looked up at the room, and I took a quick visual reconnaissance. I noticed it had a podium up there, and it had "We Care" on the front of it. I thought, well, we're going to get a Red Cross lecture this morning. Sat there minding my own business. I noticed there was a microphone and an amplifier and 4 huge speakers around the corner of the room. A couple of the windows were missing. I sat there minding my own business, and promptly at 10 o'clock, and for you 90 newcomers, you can set your watch by this, some big, good-looking Seabee got up in front of us and made a complete jackass out of himself. This guy was about 190 pounds, looked like he was solid muscle. He was really in good shape. His boots were shined, his trousers were pressed. His web belt was shined and pressed. Jacket starched. Looked regulation haircut, shaved that morning. Looked to me like he brushed his teeth. And out of his voice, through that microphone, that amplifier, those 4 stereo speakers, you could have heard him 4 blocks away with the windows missing. This is what he said. He said, "Good morning, everybody. My name is Big John, and I'm an alcoholic." And I thought, what the hell did he just say? And I was about ready to look around the room, see if anybody heard him. Boy, they heard him all right. They all yelled back, "Hello, Big John." Scared the hell out of me. And it didn't even faze John. He just kept right on going, said he hadn't had a drink in 9 weeks. And I thought, how the hell did he do that? See, I tried. It didn't work. Then he said he didn't need a drink today. I didn't understand that at all. I didn't have to look at my watch. I knew it was 10 o'clock in the morning. I needed a drink. But I'll tell you what, folks, when he got to that part about being a grateful alcoholic, I damn near fell out of my chair. I tell you. And he just kept right on going. He pulled one of the slickest bits of Navy indoctrination I guess I've ever seen in my life. He didn't even snap his fingers. Just like that, everybody in the room was jumping up and down, yelling they were alcoholic. I thought, what the hell is this? I'm in the wrong place. And this giant wave, there were 96 of us in there that morning, and it was just getting closer and closer to me over here, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I didn't pay any attention. This guy sitting next to me until that point. It happened to be a Marine gunnery sergeant. And by golly, when it became his turn, he jumped up and he said he was an alcoholic. And he sat back down, and I thought, by God, if the gunny can do it, I can do it. So I jumped up and I said, I'm Bob and I'm an alcoholic. And I sat back down and I thought, what the hell did you do that for? You know, God almighty. And I wanted to run and I didn't know where to go. And I'm telling you something, they started some routine in there that was really, really ridiculous. And for you 95 newcomers in here tonight, I want to point out to you that I learned in my first meeting of AA, you know, that some of us have a weird sense of humor. I learned that, number one, in my first meeting. And number two, I learned about this thing called sharing. I mean, never used the word in my life. But let me describe sharing to you first. You see, what they do is they call you out of the audience and you come up and tell everybody what you were never going to tell anybody. And that's sharing, you see. Now, let me give you an example of what happened. And I was so embarrassed for this kid. I mean, they had to get him a stool to reach the microphone, for God's sake. He had no stripes on his sleeve or nothing, just a seaman. Couldn't have been over 20 years old. And in a very soft, low voice, he started telling this story. And it was horrible. I mean, he was from a farm in Iowa or someplace, you know, and his dad died of cancer, you know, and he was the oldest member of several children, and he was in high school, but he had to quit high school because, you know, he had to raise money to feed the family. And, of course, he drank a lot. I learned that right away. And, of course, one night he came home after work, and he was tanked up, and he got a traffic ticket. And a few people in the front row laughed. I thought, God, that's rude, you know. And he kept, every time he'd say something that was a little bit worse about drinking, everybody'd start laughing. And I didn't understand that. I really felt sorry for him. But he got to the last part of this story, and, you know, I mean, he cracked his car up, and they didn't have enough money to buy him a new car, and the poor kid had to join the Navy. God, I really felt sorry for him then. I mean, then he wound up aboard ship, and they wound up in the Subic Bay in the Philippines, and he went into this beautiful city called Olongapo. Oh, you've been there, huh? Anyway, then he went back aboard ship that night, and he fell asleep in his bunk with a cigarette in his hand and burned half the ship down, and everybody went, yay, you know. And in my outfit, they called that destruction of government property, you know. I didn't like it either. Anyway, God, I just wanted to run, get out of there, but they kept going with this sharing business, you know, and finally it ended. I was so grateful. I didn't know what was coming next, but I tell you what, I didn't expect it. I'll tell you that. In my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I learned something else. I learned what you meant by something I couldn't even pronounce. Pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I learned that in my first meeting of AA. Well, let me put it to you this way. Have any of you ever had to hold hands with a gunnery sergeant? I couldn't even look at this dude. And boy, I went out that door as fast as I could going down this passageway. And I was looking over my shoulder to see if anybody was following me, you know. And inside the room, they're in there hugging each other. Sailors and sailors and Marines and Marines and sailors and Marines and sailors. And boys and girls and boys. I thought, what the hell am I doing here? And I'm turning around to get out of here, and right there blocking my way is another one of these long-haired, short-trousered dudes. He's standing there with his hands on his hips and his feet spread, got a crew cut, hair down to his chin, trousers up to his knees. One of those Navy chiefs, you know. He spoke with a German accent. He told me immediately that his name was Clarence. I thought that's exciting. And then he goes into this dissertation of what had happened to him. And he got to the punchline, and he said he'd been riding around submarines for 12 years. And then he said he was an alcoholic. Well, hell, I knew why he was an alcoholic. Those subs are dangerous, you know. They do all kinds of strange things. They go underwater and all that stuff. And then he told me he was my counselor. I didn't laugh, folks. As a matter of fact, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about until he gave me permission to go to noon chow. My God, I thought that was nice of him, you know. On my way back from chow, I didn't know whether I was coming back to where I was supposed to be or not, but I did. And I found Clarence and about 8 sailors sitting around in a circle reading out of something they called the Big Book. I mean, they had no class there. I had to go out and get my own share, you know. 4.5 hours later, we're still reading out of this thing called the Big Book. And the day finally ended, and all I wanted to do was get to the parking lot and get in the car and get on home. And now, this is the coup de grace. I'm told I'm not leaving the naval station. Somebody had the authority, allegedly, to put me on 2 weeks medical restriction. Can you believe that? And I found out his name was Persh, and he was a commander. And, you know, I wanted to talk to him, I'll tell you that. But anyway, I said, all right, where am I going to stay tonight, you know? Well, they had that all figured out. There was a hospital ship tied up to the pier. It was called the Repose. That was where I was to be billeted. God, I tell you, the pier was connected to an island, and they call that terminal. Very appropriate, very appropriate. Anyway, I just wanted to finish chow and get a shower and hit the rack. And well, I got about halfway through dessert. Another sailor entered my life. He said, "Okay, all you alcoholics, fall out." I thought, oh my God, what class, you know? Just. I poked the guy next to me. I said, "Is he talking to us?" He said, "Yeah, there's a bus on the pier. You better get on it." Down the gangplank we went. U.S. Navy written all over the side of the bus. It was not a good day, folks. Oh, across the naval station we went, you know, the bus driver. He was really something, that guy. He stops at the gate. I'm on the right side of the bus. I look out the window. There's about 20 people out there, Marines, kids, dependents, wives, sailors. The bus driver opens the bus door, and he just yells out, "We're going to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous." And oh, my God. God, he had no class, I'll tell you. Down the freeway we went. Hell, I thought they were taking me home. We turned off on Bellflower and wound up on Clark Street. Monday night, the Ringling Brothers of Alcoholics Anonymous. I swear to God. Of course, I had a few things to say to those guys in there. I was so angry, and those bouncers at the door. I mean, oh, for you 102 newcomers, some people, some of you call them greeters. I call those guys bouncers. They were mean suckers. You know, they looked like the defensive line for the Rams when they won. You know, they had a few things to say to me, like, go find a chair, sit down, listen, and shut up. Consequently, I didn't learn a lot in that meeting. I didn't remember too much, except I did meet the godfather of the group. Now, he'd spent 17 years in the penitentiary, you see, and he was the godfather of the group, and I was impressed with that. I knew why he was an alcoholic, and I felt sorry for him. But, oh yeah, and the little lady that was up on the stage, she was trying to read. All she could do was giggle. That was his wife. And that's all I remember about that meeting, you know. And then the next Monday rolls around, and I asked my buddy if we could get in our car and just skip the school bus and get out there a little early to meet some of the people. What happened in a week? Hell, what happened in 3 days? Because I stood up at a meeting in Los Alamitos on Wednesday night, on the first week I was in that hospital, and I said, "I'm Bob, and I'm an alcoholic," and I seemed to know what I was talking about. In 3 days, 6 meetings. I began to wonder about it when some jerk handed me a broom after the meeting, told me to get busy, but, you know. What happened? I haven't got the slightest idea. I can tell you what didn't happen. See, I was on restriction. Yes, I was. And Pat wasn't around poking her finger in my face, yelling, you know, "You're a drunk, go get help." God, I got tired of that. You know, Clarence and you have never told me I'm an alcoholic. Now, you know what you told me. You told me things like, "I know how you feel." God, I was suspicious of that. I didn't believe you. But, you know, I'm a captive audience. I'm riding around the damn bus. And I'm going to meetings. And eventually I got to listen. And I found out very early for me, and this is me, that maybe I'm not an alcoholic because of what alcohol made me do. Maybe I'm an alcoholic because of the way I had to feel about what I had to do as the result of drinking alcohol. And I'd like to share with you 150 newcomers in here just exactly what I'm talking about here, because I don't want you to misunderstand me. And it's a very short experience. And I'm going to share it. And at the end of this thing, I don't have to explain to you what I'm talking about. Okay? Pat and Laura and Rhonda and I were in Virginia. I was being transferred for another tour in Vietnam. I had 2 weeks left before I left for Vietnam. You know I wanted that to be a good 2 weeks. You talk about controlled drinking. At any rate, we were to leave on Tuesday. The day was Sunday. And we were living in one of my buddy's condominiums and just waiting for Tuesday to come so we could get on the airplane and fly out here. I had already come out here earlier and bought a house. Got us a place to live. And it was a beautiful October day in Virginia. It was crisp, cold, beautiful blue sky. The leaves were red, yellow. Just a gorgeous day. And Pat and I decided that we were going to take the kids out to dinner that night. And they were looking forward to it. And, 5:30 in the afternoon, I'm taking the family down the freeway to this place we're going to go to dinner. And evidently, I'm not doing a very good job. You see Pat's in that right front passenger seat, and she's crying, and she's yelling, and she's screaming, and she's trying to reach over to get the keys out of the ignition of that car. Rhonda is 13 years old at the time. She's not crying or screaming or yelling. She's just sitting there in the kind of like in the middle of the back seat, kind of leaning forward. I can see her in the rearview mirror. Rhonda is doing one thing. She's looking. And even in the rearview mirror, I recognize the look because, we have seen it before. I think I first saw it on Pat's expression. Laura, 7 years old, behind me is cuddled down and cowering down, kind of like in the corner of that back seat. And Laura is crying, and Laura is crying silently. Okay, that's the scenario. That's the scene. What happened? Not much. About 2 o'clock that afternoon, I decided, what the hell's one drink going to hurt? So I had it. By the way, there was no glass or vermouth or ice cubes or toothpicks or olives or onions. Those things took up room. The drink was a quart. It was a tall quart. It had frosty glass on 2 or 3 sides. Had Gilby's written on the front of it. GIN, as a matter of fact. And I'm doing the best I can do. Now let's get back to Rhonda's expression. I think my dad probably saw the same expression on my face when I was about 7 years old. I remember it. I certainly remember Dad's lack of attention to me. I certainly remember that I wanted to tell Dad more than once, why the hell couldn't you get home last night? It was Christmas Eve, or words to that effect. You see, Dad drank too much. My dad was never available to me. My dad never showed me any emotion. My dad raised his 3 sons in an environment where you don't cry. It's not manly. And I grew up hating my dad because I couldn't trust him. And I did the same thing when I became of age that my 2 older brothers did. I took off. In my case, I came to California because I wanted to play ball, and I never turned back. It was a very confusing environment with a devout Roman Catholic mother who required us to go to Mass every day and twice on Sundays, and I'm not exaggerating because one Mass we sang and one Mass we served. It was an environment where the nuns taught us this love business, and I got home, and I'll tell you what, I think my mom invented the Frisbee in 1939. Could she throw those dishes? I mean, And Dad was trying to catch him, and he couldn't do it, Confusing. The look of contempt, okay? Laura, Why is she crying? She's crying because she's afraid her dad's going to kill her. And she's crying silently probably because she's afraid her dad's going to tell her to shut up and grow up, or, words to that effect. I became the commanding officer to two little girls. I didn't want that to happen. I was the dad that required to answer the phone in the proper manner, if you please. I wouldn't let the kids have a dog. I didn't want the dog stinking up the house. I don't think those kids had a very good time growing up around this drunk. We were very concerned about Rhonda because she was having a hell of a time in school. Probably because we were so dysfunctional. But we got to dinner. I can't tell you the rest of the story. I don't remember it. We evidently got home because when I came to or woke up or whatever the hell happened to me, I was okay. And I want to point out to you that this is the situation that I dread. This is what I said about having to feel about the way I felt about what alcohol made me do. Now, do you think I jumped up and ran in and grabbed those kids and gave them a hug and said, boy, we sure had a good time the other night, didn't we? I didn't even know what day it was, for God's sake. No. And that has never happened in 20 years, 6 months, and 14 days, or 20, what is today, the 24th? 14th, huh? 14th. I didn't say I was well, I just said I'm a sober runner. I got to go home on Thanksgiving and this Thanksgiving weekend, and I brought a message to Pat, and for once I didn't try to make it a direct order. The message was simple. Pat, come on up to the hospital and learn about something called alcoholism. And I knew she wouldn't come, and as a matter of fact, I'd already heard that she'd seen a lawyer. But I walked in the door, I guess, and Pat told me later she didn't recognize me. Shot put her. She didn't recognize me. And I guess she was referring to the fact that in 2 weeks my eyes had cleared up and some of the redness came out of my cheeks and a few other things. I was amazed. And we had our discussions and we had our talks, and Monday morning she got in the car and went up to the hospital with me. And in the next 7 weeks, I think Pat and I know, in my case, I became closer to Pat than I'd ever been in my life. No, we weren't in the same group. We did go to open meetings together. It was really an educational experience. And I am so very grateful today because, several things happened in there that I can help 120 newcomers with, I can tell you that. I do want to mention the phases of recovery. Some of us have heard about those. And I'm a duty expert on the phases of recovery. Now, you newcomers, don't let this worry you because you can skip them. Just get right on with your life if you want to. And I'll give you a quick example of this. You see, there are several phases, but the one I was involved in is called the intellectual phase of recovery. Some of you have heard about that, huh? Well, what happened in my case is that I used to help Clarence along. After all, he was only a chief. And, I helped him look good in front of the group, didn't I? And I asked him all these intellectual questions, the answers to which I already knew, obviously. But, I'd ask him all these questions, and one day I was shocked because I asked Clarence this question, and the question is very simple. I knew the answer to it, but I knew a lot of the people in there in the group didn't, and the question is this. Clarence, why do I drink? Now, hell, I knew why I drank. For God's sake, if you were married to Pat, you'd drink too, If those kids would just shape up, The commandant of the Marine Corps, hurry up and retire. We could all get promoted, I had a drink one night because our Siamese cat had a crooked tail. I knew why I drank. How about those dudes that put on the toilet paper backwards just to drive me crazy, You know what Clarence told me? It's in the book. I said, what? He said, it's in the book. So, I'm alcoholic. What did I do? I went and read the book. I went back to Clarence. I said, it's not in there. Yeah, it is, he said. I said, no, it's not. 5 times I said, it's not in there. 5 times he said, yes, it is. And finally he gave up on me and he picked up a book. And he read it to me out of the book, Why I Drank. Got sober and went blind. Believe me, folks, it's in the book. This is on page XXVI. XXVI, right here. You'll notice when you check on me tonight, when you get home, it's got little print. What I did, you see, I read the big print. I figured if they couldn't put it all in the same size print, why the hell read it? So I just skipped that part. XXVI. Now, could we hold the noise down, please? Just keep it quiet. I don't want any of these newcomers to miss this. This is why I drank. Drank. XXVI. Men and women XXVI. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And life goes on. I could tell you a lot about my experience in the hospital. Don't have the time. It was a wonderful experience, and the day came when I had to leave, and I'm scared to death. And I don't tell anybody. By the way, I don't know yet if I'm going to get court-martialed for the insubordination that I had to lay on the regimental commander. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I do know this. You taught me I'm a very sensitive human being, and boy, did I believe that. But you know what? I'm me, and you are you. And you told me, as Clarence did and as Pat did, as a matter of fact, you can be anything you want to be and do anything you want to do, but you don't have to drink. And I thought to myself, how the hell did they know? They're not Marines. What the hell am I going to do on the 10th of November, the Marine Corps birthday? Drink Coke? You got to be kidding. Now, I didn't want to drink, but I got a problem. Now, if I don't get court-martialed or I don't get punished, and everything's smoothed over, I know, number one, I'll never get a command back. Number two, I can't retire. I don't have enough time. I got a year to do before I can retire. And so I just made up my mind what I was going to do. I'm going back to Camp Pendleton, take my medicine, stay off the skyline, do the best job I can do, and then retire and go do something else where I don't have to drink. A good plan, right? I thought it was. Of course, the sensitivity business, you know, I shared in group one day. I said, you know, God, I go back to Camp Pendleton where I was embarrassed and humiliated and had to give up a command. I mean, what are my old drinking buddies going to say to me, you know? Some jerk in the back of the room said, what do you mean, both of them? You know. And you know, there's 18,000 Marines down here at Camp Pendleton, and when I go through Vandergrift Boulevard through that main gate, there's going to be 18,000 Marines standing there saying, hey, there goes the drunk. There he goes. And God, I don't want to face that. Well, in quick order, let me run through this. I didn't hear you. I did not hear you. I went down there and I became a workaholic. I checked in, by the way, the division command post, which was routine. The commanding general called me in his office. And he said, Bob, I don't know whether you remember it or not, but he said, I want to welcome you back. But when you left, I don't know whether you remembered or not, but I said to you, when you come back, I'll try to find you a good job. He said, I didn't say when you come back. I said, or if you come back. I said, when you come back. Made a big difference to me, and he gave me a pretty good staff job, and I knew I was not going to get a command. And I was on my job there the third day, and my boss came in, and he closed my office door and kind of scooted a chair up in front of my desk, and he kind of leaned over the desk in a very quiet voice. He said, Bob, he said, I got an 18-year-old that's really acting weird. He said, I understand you know something about alcoholism. He said, can you help me out? Of course, I became an immediate counselor. But that's the way it was, and I buried myself in my work. And of course, Pat and I did what you suggested. We had those meetings with the kids, you know, and they understood that they were not responsible for me being a drunk, and we didn't know, you know, whether they understood that or not, but that's the way it was. And thank God for Pat, she followed through on that very well. But I had other things to do, didn't I? I had to pay the Marine Corps back for giving me 9 weeks off, didn't I? I had to behave myself so I could get out of that Marine Corps and go do something else and not drink. And I don't have much time for you folks. In fact, I didn't have any time for you folks. Hell, I'd been to meetings twice a week for twice a day for 9 weeks. Isn't that enough? I read the book 5 times. And I thought I was getting well, huh? And what happened to Pat and our relationship? Right down the plug hole. I just blew it. I really did. I mean, we were so close. And, well, hell, I'm leaving at dark in the morning. I'm coming home at dark at night. What's Pat doing? Well, she joined the enemy, you know. Yeah. It's called Al-Anon, you know. He's running all over South Orange County there to open meetings of AA and her Al-Anon meetings, and we're not seeing each other, and when we do see each other, I blew it. I told you I was such a smart ass because I read the book 5 times. Pat and I were getting ready for bed about a month and a half after I got out of the hospital. I don't know when it was. And I'm telling Pat in no uncertain terms how I'm feeling about this entire relationship. And I made a statement that's kind of in the book. It's not in there word for word, but it's there. I didn't know it was there. I said, Pat, what the hell's the matter with you? I am sober. Isn't that enough? Have you ever heard a 20-minute dissertation from an Al-Anon? It took her 20 minutes to tell me no. And she started off describing how she saw me hiding, withdrawn, depressed. She had some big words. And I mean, I was listening. I was listening. You would have used the word or term dry drunk. She didn't even stop at that. She just kept right on going. She entered her dissertation in the clothes closet, as I recall, yelling at me out of the clothes closet. I'm sitting on the end of the bed, you know. And she said 2 things to me. She said, Bob, if you want to live this way, that's fine, but I don't. I understood that. And then she said, I want to remind you what Clarence told you when you left the hospital, something about staying close to the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And God, I knew she had me. You 122 newcomers, I'm going to use another word. The word is miracle. I had one that night. No, the roof didn't fall off. I listened. That was the miracle. The next day was Tuesday. I got home at a reasonable time, and I had dinner with the family. And at 8 o'clock, I backed the car out of the garage and drove down the hill in Dana Point to a Carpenter's Hall in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. About 16 people sitting around in a circle reading out of something they called the Big Book. And my life started to change. I didn't have to go on a reconnaissance to figure out where I was going to go on the rest of the evenings on the week. Pat had already been there, right? At least to the open meetings. And my home group, speakers group now, is the Wednesday night meeting in Laguna Beach. Laguna Beach, you know, that's that town down there. When a man tells me he loves me, I check him out. And now my Thursday night stag in San Juan Capistrano. And Pat and I used to go to the open meetings on the weekends in the park, and well, not the park, the grade school in Laguna Niguel. And my life started to change, and all of a sudden I'm having more time on my hands. And it was interesting that my good friend Larry back here had met a former commanding officer of mine in the Marine Corps, and Larry got to know Colonel Gately very well, and I wound up working for this guy, and he was not in the fellowship, but he was such a neat guy, and I finally understood, you know, that there are people out there who are pretty neat, and I didn't have to fight the world anymore. And I didn't have to feel guilty. If I wanted to feel guilty, I could feel guilty, but I didn't have to. And I used tapes. It was 45 minutes to get from home down to Mainside Camp Pendleton. And I put these tapes in my car and I'd play them, you know. And I don't know what the hell the carpool thought about them, but boy, they were all right for me. I can tell you that. On my 4th birthday, Laura wrote me a birthday card. The little girl that I scared to death in the car that night. And she wrote it herself. She didn't go down and buy one. She wrote it on a white card, and she used Marine Corps green ink. I thought that was classy. And this is what she said. Dad, I like you. I don't mean I love you. You know I love you. I just wanted you to know that I like you a lot too. Happy 4th birthday. 4 years. Rhonda, who, by the way, is doing very well and has got a job down in the marina at a restaurant, and of course she can afford to buy a store-bought card, and that's what she did. And oh, will you shut up? She bought a store-bought card, and she signed it, "We love you, Rhonda and Boof." Boof's our dog. Yeah, one of those family meetings, we asked the kids what they wanted, and of course they wanted a dog, and we all agreed it was going to be a German Shepherd, and I told you I was alcoholic. I just kind of calculated it out. I figure it's going to take me about 30 days just to select this dog. We had a dog the next day. Rhonda went to the pound in Laguna Beach and called Pat at 4:30 in the afternoon, and she said, "You know, they're going to kill this dog if I don't bring it home." What the hell Pat's going to say? No, you know? And Mo, by the way, she said they said it's a German Shepherd, and you could hold this thing in your hand. I swear to God, Pat grabbed that little sucker and put him in the sink and got all the fleas off of him she could find. And Boo started to grow. And about 12 weeks later, Rhonda and her friends, who, by the way, are coming around the house again, you know how that goes, they're looking at Boof in the driveway. Is that murder or is that a bird? Oh. We're looking at Boof in the driveway, and they're asking Rhonda, what happened to your German Shepherd? Let me describe this dog to you if I can. Oh, Boof, you know, he had teeth like an alligator. He had a nose like a shepherd. He had eyes like a fawn, ears like an Afghan, a collar like a collie, a body like a greyhound, and a tail like a donkey. I don't know what the hell you're laughing about. He reminded me of you. Well, he did. You know, like you, Boof came to me in all colors. He was red, and he was white, and he was black, and yellow. Like you, he had long hair and short hair. Like you, in a couple of spots, he had no hair at all. You know how that goes. You know, like you, he didn't seem to be the least impressed that I had a rank. Like you, he didn't mention it a hell of a lot. I know Boof wasn't too impressed I had 2 cars in the garage. In fact, he peed on one of them. And Boof and I grew up together. We really did. And, you know, the day came when I had to take Rhonda down the aisle and give her away to some jackass. And Boof stayed. He's my dog now, see. And we continued to grow. And I finally realized before the day came when I had to put this guy to sleep, this beautiful dog, because he didn't give up like you. But I had to put him to sleep, and I realized what this beautiful dog meant to me. Yeah. You see, it's very simple. He became my friend. And I was the jackass in a group in the hospital in Long Beach, California, who told the group, I don't need friends, you know. And Clarence laughed. Clarence laughed. My stag meeting in San Juan Capistrano is a wonder. I was sitting there one time. I had gone to this meeting for about 2 or 3 years, almost every Thursday night. And I'm sitting in my command module at home watching the boob tube. And the time comes for this meeting, and I don't want to go to that meeting Thursday night. And I just sat there, and I finally got up, turned off the television, got out in the car. And I knew all the questions that were going to be asked, and not only that, I knew all the answers, didn't I? Hell, I've been going there 3 years. And you know what some jerk asked at that meeting that night? He said, "What is love?" And my first reaction was, why the hell does he bother us with this crap? Why doesn't he have a sponsor? Well, one of you named Ray, he didn't take that attitude. And we always sat in that meeting. We never stood up, but Ray that night stood up. And he gave me, in about 5 minutes, a definition of love. I couldn't believe it. A bunch of guys in a stag meeting talking about love, for God's sake. And I didn't know what I was going to do with that, but I walked out of that meeting that night, and I knew it was going to be useful. And within a year, my father became very, very ill. And I was to go back up above Spokane, Washington to see my dad and to see him wither away and die. But before he died, just because I got off my ass and went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was able to tell my own father 6 times that I loved him. 6 times. What happened? The definition of love that I got in that stag meeting, in the San Juan Capistrano stag meeting that night, was very simple. And you have probably lived this way all of your lives, but I have not. Ray told me that love means giving yourself to another human being and not asking anything in return. It was beautiful. And I got to thinking about Dad. And I got to thinking about the days that I recall my mom telling us that Dad never had an opportunity to finish the 8th grade. In fact, my mom was a school teacher and took Dad through the 8th grade when he was about 17 years old. And I remembered that Dad had 3 jobs on one occasion so that his 3 sons would have a roof and food and clothing. And I was afraid Dad didn't hear me tell him that I loved him. Because, boy, if that's not unconditional love, I don't know what it is. He never asked anything in return. And the 6th time I told Dad that I loved him, the last things I have ever said to my dad while he was here on earth, I knew that he had finally heard me. Because you see, the dad that never showed me any emotion, who was never around, who I thought didn't care, when I told him that I loved him for the last time, I knew he heard me because he cried. And I walked away from that experience wondering, or convinced, if you will, what I would have missed had I not gone to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. For those of you who haven't noticed, I'd like to call your attention to my coat. If any of you would like to come up and get a closer look, we can do that later. I'll try to describe it to you because I know you can't see it very well. This is camouflage material. This is camouflage material that was made in South Carolina and worn by the South Vietnamese. When I was in Saigon the last time, I found a bolt of this stuff, or not a bolt, but a lot of it. And so I went down to a tailor in Saigon, and I was drunk enough not to care and sober enough to get a good fit. And you got a lot of colors too, I can tell you that. And I want to tell you why I got the coat. Because it was during the time when I was still a practicing alcoholic, of course. I needed a conversation piece at cocktail parties. That's why I bought the coat. And now I only wear it on special occasions. I mean, it's lined in silk, you know, very nice. This is a special occasion. It seems to me that a lot of days in Alcoholics Anonymous are special occasions. I didn't stay in the Marine Corps a year. I stayed in the Marine Corps 8 years. And I didn't have to drink alcohol. I got transferred to El Toro, where they fly airplanes. You know, I was a real Marine. I didn't fly. And I didn't know really what the hell I was doing up there because they had one job in the entire wing command post for a lieutenant colonel. And I got the job. And a few weeks went by and I got a call from Headquarters Marine Corps, and the guy told me on the phone, he said, Bob, you're going to be in the zone for selection for promotion. And the promotion board is meeting on such and such a date. It's going to be 4 weeks long and all this stuff. And I immediately ran to my sponsor. Now, I selected my sponsor after I was sober a year. You told me not to make any decisions within the first 12 months. And I selected this guy because he could only speak Swedish. And I thought he could only speak Swedish, but he speaks English pretty well. And Yanni, he told me, he said, I might suggest you increase your meeting itinerary, you know. Smart-ass sponsors. And so I did, and while this promotion board was in session, Pat and I shared a couple of Sunday nights, for example, at the grade school in Laguna Niguel, and it was Bob Green sharing for the first Sunday night there. And, you know, everybody knew he was dying of cancer, but he shared 50 minutes. And I walked out of there knowing that I didn't have a problem. The next Sunday night, a couple shared, and their daughter had committed suicide a year before that. And I knew I didn't have a problem. But I didn't want to, I hate to get beat, you know, and I really wanted that rank. And I got another phone call from Headquarters Marine Corps one day after that board had been in session, and this guy's telling me, he said, Bob, you've been selected for the rank of colonel in the United States Marine Corps. I want to tell you why I'm telling you this. I love to brag. But I'm also telling you this because you need to know that my successes, whatever they are, have been as the direct result of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and what I've learned. And I also tell you this because I want to tell you what I thought about when this guy told me this. And for once in my life, I didn't think about Bob or those kids or the United States Marine Corps. No, I thought about some long-haired, short-trousered Navy chief in a hospital in Long Beach, California. Looked a very scared human being, frightened to death in the eye, and said, hey, look, if you want what we've got, I'm here to help you find it. I think I used to be the only Marine on active duty running around telling anybody who wanted to listen that he loved a Navy chief. I'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't let that get out too far. In quick succession, I got a command back 3 times the size of that battalion I had to leave in disgrace. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm quite aware that not too many of you are interested in making colonel in the United States Marine Corps. Matter of fact, I'm quite aware that some of you may not like the military at all. That's fine with me. That's not why we're here. What I am interested in is if you hear me, especially you 122 newcomers, because it doesn't make any difference. You see, life isn't rosy. Pat and I have had a hell of a year and a half. I lost a job. We lost a beautiful cat. Pat's father had a stroke. We brought him down from Humboldt County down to our home so we could get him well. And we lost him. My 2 remaining aunts on my mother's side died in the last year. It has not been a rosy picture. But what's the difference? The difference is I didn't have to drink. Rhonda and Laura are mothers. By the way, Rhonda graduated from college with a master's degree. She's now licensed in the state of California. They're mothers of 2 sons each. I've got 4 beautiful grandsons. I've got 2 great sons-in-law. We have 2 beautiful cats today. We live in relative peace. We love the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous in Al-Anon. I want to tell you something, those sons-in-laws, those grandsons, my 2 cats, They've never seen me drunk. And I think that's the bottom line. You 130 newcomers, keep coming back. Please keep coming back. We can't get you sober, but we can point you in the right direction. And if it helps, let me tell you something. I love you. We love you. And God loves you. Thanks a lot.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel and let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.